Hi, you guys. Welcome back. And of course, if you are new to this channel, welcome. My name is Tracy, and in this video, I'm going to teach you guys how to scry using a crystal ball. So stay tuned. People have gazed upon reflective surfaces for scrying for as long as humanity has been around. So since ancient times, people have actually stared into reflective surfaces to kind of get a glimpse of their future or their past and to learn a little something about themselves or other people. It was actually common for people to use many different ways for scrying to look in reflective surfaces. So in ancient times, it was well known that people could stare into a pool of water, ink, knife blades, basically anything with a reflective surface. Some people were even known to buff their fingernails to a shine so that they could then gaze into the reflection of their own fingernails. These items were accessible to anyone, anywhere, for scrying. Now, the crystal balls, on the other hand, were very pricey in ancient times. Therefore, only the wealthy could have the crystal ball for scrying. The use of the actual crystal ball can be traced all the way back to the ancient Druids. And they were known to use very small, about half-inch diameter crystal balls. And they would gaze into these crystal balls to scry for future or to learn about their past, like I had already stated. Nowadays, people use much larger crystal balls because it is easier to see any images that might appear if your crystal ball is larger. So, like the one you see back here, a lot of crystal balls in use today are about 2.5-inch or larger diameters. So that's quite a bit larger than the ones of the ancient Druid times. I have actually had my crystal ball for right around 7 or 8 years. And it actually took me years of practice to finally kind of understand how to use the crystal ball. At the time when I first purchased my crystal ball back here, I was still under the guidance of a spiritual teacher. And so therefore I was to do an exercise of concentration on my crystal ball each and every day for 10 minutes. Or maybe it was 15. Either way, I would set a timer and do this exercise of simply gazing into the crystal ball. And so during that time, when I was still under the guidance of my spiritual teacher, I would leave the crystal ball on the stand that you see it on now and put it on the table in front of me and just simply gaze at it. But the problem at that time was that I always fell asleep. So within that 10 to 15 minute time frame, I would be dozing off the whole time or simply fighting this incredible urge to just go to sleep. So when I brought this up with my spiritual teacher at the time, I said, well, every single time that I try to do this exercise and to concentrate on, gazing at the ball, it makes me tired and it makes me fall asleep. Now his only suggestion was it's possible that because I put it on a table in front of me, that then I have to kind of put my gaze downward, to look down at the table like that. So therefore it was like making my eyes feel more droopy and sleepy because I'm kind of looking down. So I considered that, and then I started putting it up on a stand so it was more eye level, and therefore my eyes wouldn't be kind of shutting while I was concentrating on it. Now, unfortunately, that didn't work either. So no matter what, every time I sat down to gaze at my crystal ball, I started to fall asleep. And it was only years later, after I was no longer under the guidance of my spiritual teacher, that I just kind of figured it out on my own. Because back then, in the early years of using my crystal ball, I was always afraid to touch it. I did not want my crystal ball to have fingerprints on it. So anytime I picked it up, I would have a soft cloth to move it around, and I would place it in a box when I wasn't using the crystal ball. And it was just all very sacred, and I didn't want to touch it. I was afraid of touching it. But later on, I realized that you actually should hold your crystal ball. You should not just gaze at a crystal ball that's sitting on a stand on a table in front of you. And honestly, I believe that I got that process from, Hollywood in general. Because anytime in the movies where you see like a fortune teller or something with a crystal ball, it's usually just on a stand in the middle of the table and they gaze into this ball. I've never really seen it done where they're just holding it in front of them as they gaze. So anyway, one day, years later, I was just curious again about my crystal ball. And so I got it out of my cabinet. And this time, instead of placing it on the table in front of me, I decided to hold it in my hands. As soon as I placed the crystal ball in my hands, I could feel the energy vibrating from my hands and into the crystal, or maybe from the crystal and into my hands. Either way, I felt this magnetism between me and my crystal ball that I had never felt before, but it was because I finally picked it up and touched it with my own hands. So you guys, you have to pick up your crystal ball. Even if you don't want fingerprints all over it, just pick it up and use it. You can wipe it down with a velvet cloth when you're done to remove any fingerprints that you happen to get on it. So my best piece of advice based on my own experience is to just play with your ball. You have to actually get it out and you have to hold it in your hands. You cannot just leave it sitting on a table on a stand and expect to truly connect with it. And I do believe that I always fell asleep when I was going to concentrate on my crystal ball, simply because my crystal ball knew that I wasn't connecting with it. So it wasn't connecting with me. Not until I actually was not afraid to pick it up and hold it. So in this video, I am going to explain to you how to use a crystal ball for scrying. As with any spiritual tool that you want to use in your practices, you're going to want to start by cleansing your crystal ball. Some very popular ways to cleanse the crystal ball are, one, you can run it under water, and that's because quartz is usually the type of crystal that is used for a crystal ball, and quartz crystal is fine to be placed in water. So if you have a crystal ball made of another type of crystal, you may want to make sure that it's safe to put in water without damaging your crystal. Now, to cleanse it with water, I would just place the crystal ball inside of your sink and just let the water run over it as you see in your mind all of the, negative or unwanted energies just washing off of your crystal ball. Another way that you can cleanse your crystal ball is to place it in a bowl of salt overnight. Salt is known to draw out any negative energies. So salt's a great tool, cleansing tool to use for crystals as well. Now, if you have a crystal ball other than quartz, again, you're going to want to make sure that it's hard enough on the Mohs scale so that the salt doesn't scratch your crystal or damage it in some way. So I would only recommend using salt to cleanse your crystal if your crystal is at least probably a 5 or a 6 on the Mohs scale of hardness. And my favorite way to cleanse all of my crystal tools is to just kind of let the crystal be cleansed with the smoke of sage. And to do that, you would simply light a sage smudge stick, and just waft the smoke over the crystal ball while at the same time seeing any negative or unwanted energies being taken away by the smoke of the sage. So once you've cleansed your crystal ball, you can then charge it if you would like as well. And I've spoken about charging crystals under the moonlight, the full moon especially. You can also charge them by letting them sit in the sunlight for a couple hours, or you can even bury your crystal in the earth overnight or for 24 hours. And that will properly charge your crystal with plenty of good energy to use in any of your rituals. So once you cleanse your crystal, then you want to charge the crystal if you have not charged it before. And then it's time to get ready to do your practice. So I would just recommend setting up your space or to perform this exercise in your sacred space that you may already have set up in your home. And so you just want to gather up all the supplies you're going to need. And by supplies, I just mean if you like incense to be burning, you want to get that prepared. If you want some light instrumental music playing in the background, you could do that as well. Just set up the most calming and relaxing space that you can to perform your scrying exercise. So prepare your space, get it very relaxing and calm. It is daytime right now. You can scry with a crystal ball during the day, but similar to the black obsidian mirror scrying, which I made a video about that I'll go ahead and post a link to up above for you. But similar to that, scrying is, to me, most beneficial when you do it at night in a very dimly lit room, because then you're less distracted by the other reflections that you see within the crystal ball or the black obsidian mirror, whatever tool you are using to scry. And now that you have your crystal ball cleansed and charged and you have your sacred space prepared for your ritual, it's time to begin scrying. So here's how I like to start with, as with, any other spiritual practice. Just simply start by closing your eyes, sit with your spine straight, and take a few deep cleansing breaths to kind of center yourself in mind. You just want to inhale deeply through your nose, hold the breath for about 3 seconds, and exhale through your mouth a little bit longer than the inhale. So it looks like this. Just take a few deep breaths similar to what I just did. And when you're ready, then you want to image your light shining brightly in your solar plexus. And you just want to expand your light throughout your body and out into your aura. So it's like bringing awareness to your body and aura right before the practice. So after you take a few deep breaths, do a visualization of your light growing inside of you and expanding out into your aura. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes and just begin to gaze into the crystal ball. Now, you're going to want to kind of stare into it to where your eyes almost blur or feel like they're crossing. Now, I would recommend setting a timer, especially if you're new to scrying, because you don't want to be distracted by wondering, well, how long have I been sitting here? Has it been long enough? And such thoughts. So go ahead and set a timer for yourself and then begin this exercise so that you can just gaze freely into the crystal ball. And anytime that your mind wanders, you just want to bring your attention right back to the crystal ball. Don't become upset about yourself if you do, lose focus, because it's just easy to bring your focus right back to where it belongs. Now, if you get upset about it, though, then you're distracting yourself even further from being focused. So just simply forget about it and bring your attention back anytime that your mind wanders. So just continue to gaze into the crystal ball. Now, everyone's experience is going to be a little different, but that's because we each connect with our psychic abilities differently. So if you watched my video all about the clairs, or understanding the clairs, I'll go ahead and link that one up above in case you haven't seen it yet. But in that video, I explained clairvoyance, clairaudience, claircognizance, and clairsentience, which are like the inner psychic feelings or inner psychic senses. So depending on which of the clairs you are more connected with, you might see things in the crystal ball as you scry. If you're clairvoyant, if you're clairaudient, you might begin hearing things as you're gazing into the crystal ball. If you're clairsentient, then you'll feel things. And if you're claircognizant, then you will simply receive knowing without knowing how you know as you gaze into the crystal ball. I know that a lot of times we just believe that as you gaze into the crystal ball, it's just going to suddenly, you're going to start seeing things. And yes, that is true for some scryers, the people who are clairvoyant and who can have clear seeing. Then yes, you can use the crystal ball to see clearly. But what if you're not as tuned into your sense of clear seeing? Then you might have the clear knowing, clear feeling, or clear hearing come through instead. So just be open to how you might receive any type of psychic impressions that come through, because you won't necessarily just be seeing them in the ball. So once your predetermined amount of time is up and your timer goes off, you just want to bring yourself back to your body. I like to just bring my attention from the soles of my feet, up my legs and my abdomen, down my arms, my neck, and all the way up to the crown of my head. And so then once I'm fully centered, I just take another deep breath. And then it's like I'm back. And then you can, place your crystal ball back on its stand. So once your scrying session is complete, I highly recommend having your pen and journal ready for you, so that way you can write down any impressions that you received during your scrying session. Just like in your Black Obsidian Mirror exercise, these impressions that you received or thoughts that come to you during your scrying does not have to make sense right away. So I just recommend writing down everything that you experienced during that time, whether it makes sense to your conscious mind or not. Just write it down. Now, in the days that, come after your scrying session, those impressions that you received will begin to materialize in your mind, and they will begin to make more and more sense to you as a message from your highest self. So be open to anything that you receive, because you never know how it's going to turn out, in the days after your session. And you can actually be quite surprised by what some of your impressions actually turn out to be telling you. As with any spiritual practice, if you do not receive any impressions at first, don't give up on yourself. This is a spiritual practice, so therefore you do have to continue the practice. And I would recommend doing your scrying, if you're new to scrying, each and every day for at least a couple of weeks, just so that you can get used to gazing at the crystal ball. And so once you become used to gazing at the crystal ball and kind of building up your concentration and focus for whatever amount of time that you choose each day, then you can go on to the real scrying, where you're actually, you're not just practicing the concentration part, but you're literally focusing on being receptive to any impressions that come to you. But you're not always going to get a ton of impressions that come to you during a single scrying session. So never be discouraged if you feel like it's not doing anything. That just means that you have to keep practicing, and you have to just learn to become more and more receptive to your own highest self. Crystal ball, show me my future. Well, that about wraps it up for this video. So if you like this video, please go ahead and give me a big old like. And of course, if you are a viewer but not yet a subscriber, I would love for you to click subscribe. And once you're a subscriber, you can then click the bell to be notified each and every time I upload a new video. Thank you guys so much for watching and spending your time with me. I love you. And I'll see you next time. Bye.